Welcome everyone. This is the first of the series, which is so awesome. I'm gonna drop Cheyenne's Twitter in the chat, so that you can go give him a follow, and I will also drop the Encode thing in the chat as well. But if you are ready, Cheyenne, I will do that in the meantime. Take it away.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you all for making it to the first of 6 workshops. Wait, one sec. Yeah. Thank you for making it to the first of 6 workshops today, hosted by the Sui Foundation and Encode Club. My name is Shayan, and I'm a developer relations engineer here at the Sui Foundation. Today's workshop will provide a general overview and introduction into the Sui Network. So the Sui Foundation and Encode Club are proud to present the first of 6 workshops on all things Sui. As stated earlier, today's workshop is a high-level overview of the Sui network and how Sui differs from traditional blockchains. By the end of today's workshop, you will see why Sui will be the blockchain to onboard the next billion users of Web3. In subsequent workshops, we will actually get into the meat of writing some Sui Move code, and by the end of the 6 sessions, we'll have written our very own RPG dApp in Sui Move. So, since we'll be spending 6 weeks together, I'd like to take a moment and introduce myself. So, my name is Cheyenne, and I am a developer relations engineer here at the Sui Foundation. DevRel means different things to different people, but to me, it means being able to serve the Sui community, and in particular, the builders like yourselves that are grinding day and night in order to make our community a more vibrant place. I was first introduced to Sui around August of last year. I was a recent college graduate and I didn't know yet what I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to be in the Web3 space because I really believe in the ethos of decentralization and being able to contribute to a once in a lifetime technology that I believe can ultimately make the world a better place. However, with that being said, I didn't really know which blockchain to make my thing. During college, I went around programming smart contracts here and there on random blockchains, but I never really intuitively understood what I was doing. And not gonna lie, I thought it was pretty hard. It wasn't until I heard of Sui and subsequently began programming on Sui Move that I was honestly just taken aback by how intuitive and smooth the process of writing smart contracts were. Since you're learning a new programming language, there's obviously a learning curve attached to it. But in my opinion, due to Sui's object-centric approach, writing programs just makes sense, and you can tell your code what you want to do without worrying about any low-level memory management or any other, what are in my opinion, unnecessary details. After programming on Sui for several months now, I hope that this workshop series will Sui pill you the same way I was Sui pilled many months ago. So without further ado, let's get started. So for this workshop, we will go over a brief introduction into the Sui network, legacy blockchain architecture, and then more specifically, Sui's blockchain architecture and how it is primed to be the blockchain to onboard the next billion users of Web3. So let's jump right into it. With anything, what's in a name? Sui, Sui is the water element in Eastern philosophy. Like water, with the Sui platform, one will be able to utilize a flexible network to fit all of one's needs. The Sui platform is built on Sui Move, which is derived from the core Move programming language first developed for the DM blockchain at Facebook. Today's workshop is a brief introduction into the Sui platform, and subsequent workshops will focus on smart contract development in the Sui Move programming language. So what is Sui? Sui is the first permissionless layer 1 blockchain designed from the ground up to enable creators and developers to build experiences that cater to the next billion users in Web3. Sui is horizontally scalable to support a wide range of application development with unrivaled speed at low cost. Later in this workshop, we'll also expand upon what it means to be horizontally scalable as well. Where Sui really shines, however, is how it differentiates its transactions into 2 separate categories, simple and complex, and how they are handled underneath the hood. For simple transactions, i.e., when one simply sends tokens from one account to another, or when one mints an NFT, a transaction may bypass the consensus protocol. For those of you who are newer to the world of crypto and Web3, Consensus refers to how the blockchain agrees on, or comes to consensus on, the order in which the transactions occurred. For something like a blockchain, an immutable append-only ledger, knowing the order in which transactions occur in is one of the most important facets. Now, back to the point about certain simple transactions being able to bypass this protocol. This results in huge strides in scalability and throughput of the blockchain by allowing for unrelated assets to reach finality almost immediately without having to go through this relatively longer and more expensive process. For complex transactions, i.e., transactions involving shared objects, which is a topic we'll get to later in this workshop, or objects that are owned by multiple addresses, such as a liquidity pool, an order book, or any other myriad of DeFi use cases, transactions go through Sui's novel Narwhal and Bullshark DAG-based mempool and efficient Byzantine fault-tolerant BFT consensus. More on this in the next section as well. So Sui takes a significant stride in scalability due to the novel data model. Due to its object-centric view, as well as moves strong ownership types, dependencies are explicitly encoded. As a result, Sui both agrees on and executes transactions on many objects in parallel. So now let's hop into some of the terminology regarding Sui's novel consensus engine. So first let's start with DAGs. DAG is short for Directed Acyclic Graph. It is essentially a graph that never loops. It consists of edges and vertices, with each edge directed from one vertex to another, such that following those directions will never form a closed loop. Sui utilizes a DAG in the form of its mempool engine, Narwhal, which is decoupled from its consensus engine, Bullshark. By decoupling data availability from consensus, Sui is able to achieve much greater throughput at the cost of slightly higher latency. You can think of the mempool, which is a portmanteau of the words memory pool, as an organized queue where transactions are stored and sorted before being added to a newly created block. In traditional blockchains, the mempool holds fresh or unconfirmed transactions, which are stored as individual transactions, and the blockchain holds the archived transactions, which are packaged in blocks. Bullshark is a state-of-the-art consensus engine that, unlike its predecessors, allows for consistently high TPS, transactions per second, regardless if there are weaker validators in the set or not. This is helpful because now weaker validators will not bottleneck the network. So before we jump into how Sui differs from traditional blockchains, let's examine traditional blockchains up until now. So in other older blockchains, unrelated transactions in a block are processed together. So you can think of Bob sends a cool cat NFT to Bruce, Alice sends a lazy lion NFT to Alex, Jane interacts with the DEX, etc. They need to be sequenced by consensus, which is total ordering, executed, and the effects are captured in a Merkle tree. And that's what this graph above demonstrates. Above in the blue boxes, you can see everything a validator has to do in order to take that transaction and append it to the blockchain. And down below in the red boxes is every issue that occurs at that particular step in the path to reaching finality. Essentially, it boils down to the singular consensus engine being responsible for too much. As we saw earlier, Sui's approach is to split up the first two tasks between two separate engines. And for a quick primer on what a Merkle tree is, a Merkle tree is nothing more than a data structure in computer science, and as it pertains to blockchains, it was first popularized by Satoshi Nakamoto in the first ever cryptocurrency to adopt a blockchain, Bitcoin. Merkle trees provide four significant advantages. They can be used to validate the data's integrity effectively, namely that the transactions are accurate and true, etc. Compared to other data structures, the Merkle tree takes up very little disk space. And Yeah, as a result, Merkle trees can be broken down into small pieces of data for verification. And finally, since the data format is efficient, verifying the data's integrity only takes a few moments. So, with that said, let's take a look at how we can think of traditional blockchains with respect to passengers lining up for a bus. So, all passengers first line up to get on the bus. This would be consensus. Each passenger ticket is checked before the bus leaves execution, and they all get off at the same location, which is the Merkle tree update. Only then is the bus ready to take on new passengers, and only then is the blockchain ready to create a new block. So now let's take a look at how Sui works. Sui organizes data in objects. So a coin balance, an NFT instance, a smart contract. Each is a distinct object. This allows smart contracts to express computation on objects. It also means transactions are naturally organized in groups based on the objects they are targeting. So the following is a trivial example depicting 5 transactions in 3 different groups. We will come back to the single owner objects and shared objects later. For now, it is important to understand that these 3 groups can be processed independently and in parallel. Transactions on shared objects, for example, a DEX smart contract, have to go through consensus because there isn't a single owner determining order. This is where we use Narwhal and Bullshark, cutting edge consensus. So let's take a look at that same bus analogy, but for Sui. So first we want to group passengers based on their destinations. So the coin balance, NFT, DEX. Each group has their tickets checked in parallel, and they are taken by separate vehicles to go to their destination in parallel. So in traditional blockchains where everyone has to stand in the same line, on the Sui bus, there exist as many lines as there are independent objects. So a TLDR of all the information so far is presented here. Whereas in other blockchains, all transactions are ordered totally, then executed. In Sui, causal order is determined first, and then the transaction is executed. Causal order essentially refers to the fact that we don't need to know every single transaction just in order to add a new block. We can only allocate these additional resources when we know that it might potentially affect others. Sui's data model clearly delineates any dependencies between transactions. As a result, total ordering is only required for shared objects such as an AMM, and transactions not involving any shared objects. And for transactions not involving any shared objects, there's ultimately no need for consensus. So next, let's dive into the 4 big ways Sui's architecture solves pain points from first-generation blockchains. The following are horizontal scaling, composability, sparse replay, and on-chain storage. So on the Sui network, each group of transactions are processed in parallel, as opposed to the bottlenecking that occurs in V1 blockchains due to any lack of distinction between the various objects, resources, accounts, etc. on these other blockchains. Sui is able to achieve this parallelization of transactions with great efficiency due to intra-validator sharding. This is helpful because it allows costs of running a validator to remain predictable, as well as allow for the infrastructure to keep up with growth. V1 blockchains inherently have a capacity limit, i.e., transactions per second, and the Sui architecture is designed from the bottom up to be able to handle spikes in demand. So, for example, if there's this crazy new NFT mint that would potentially clog up other networks, because of Sui's horizontal scaling, other users of the Sui network will be able to continue what they're doing without any disturbance. The next big breakthrough is achieved via insane strides in composability. In Sui, unlike most other blockchains, one can directly pass in an asset, such as an NFT, directly into a function argument. And similarly, one can also return an asset from a function. Sui's object-centric approach also allows for more esoteric data structures and to be able to store your asset inside such data structure or in an asset itself. So while we'll do some move examples in the following lectures or workshops, let's go through an example right now. So let's say you're playing an on-chain game and you have a sword represented by an NFT. This sword can be equipped by you, the player, stored in a chest, or sold in an open market. In the first two scenarios, where you either equip the sword or you store it, it could be easily modeled in Sui Move as an object, which is either you, the player, or the chest, being able to accept another object, the sword, as one of its fields. The fact that you can also unequip and sell the sword demonstrates that you can unwrap the sword, which is the child object, from the player or the chest, the parent object. We'll talk more about object wrapping and parent-child objects in future lessons, but for now let's keep in mind that there exists this brand new and, in my opinion, super intuitive approach to how we treat objects/assets in Sui Move. So next, let's get into sparse replay. So naturally, a blockchain provides a ledger of every single transaction. If you're building a game, for example, chances are you don't need to be worried about what goes on in other dApps. Since querying on-chain data can be expensive, products on Sui will be able to follow the evolution of the objects in this game without digging out the data from the Merkle tree. So essentially, you just focus on what you care about the most, which is the objects from your particular dApp. The next benefit to Sui's object-centric model is how one can maintain on-chain storage of assets. Because assets are directly stored as objects on the Sui blockchain, they are never Merkleized. This is used in tandem with conventional means to scale on-chain storage, as it is much cheaper to directly update assets on-chain, instead of relying on an off-chain solution, for example. And here's another quick TLDR of the 4 ways Sui really shines: horizontal scaling, composability, sparse replay, and on-chain storage. So thank you so much for listening thus far. Here is a bibliography/further reading if you are interested in diving more into how the Sui network operates. Obviously, in my opinion, the docs are the best place to go, but these other links and threads and blog posts are also super interesting. So, before we end this presentation, I'd like to quickly share what we have in store for the next few weeks. So next week on February 15th at the same time, we'll be having our second workshop. In this workshop, we will finally write our first few lines of Sui Move. Yes. However, if you want a spoiler, and I would more than recommend you spoil yourself in this case, I would head over to docs.sui.io to get a head start. Also, starting from February 28th to March 3rd is our first Builder House of the year, the Denver Builder House. If you'll be in Denver, feel free to sign up. Spots are limited, so if you are going to be in town, please sign up ASAP. This will be a great way to meet a lot of the team at Miston Labs in the Sui Foundation, and I hear the food in Denver is pretty good as well, but who knows? And last but not least, here is a QR code linking to a type form for a simple 2-question survey for today's session. Your feedback is highly valuable, and we'll be using this to improve future sessions. So thank you for making it thus far. Now is a good time to open the floor for any questions that you all may have. My Twitter handle is also here if you'd like to reach out there. So particularly if you're interested in building on Sui, or if you already are, feel free to get in touch with me and I'll be more than happy to talk to any of you guys there. So thank you. I'll just leave it here. But yeah, thank you. Any questions? I see we have a few. So yeah. Okay, so Cedric asked, are Sui and Aptos completely independent and separate to each other? So yes, Aptos Labs is the one organization and one blockchain, and Sui is another organization and another blockchain. Sui and Aptos are both derived from Move, and that might be a reason why many Aptos wallets are integrating Sui, because Aptos Move, which is core DM Move, and Sui Move, although different, like for example, you cannot just copy and paste your Aptos dApp onto Sui similarly like how you can with EVM projects. Aptos Move and Sui Move are slightly different, but again, they're slightly different, which is why many Aptos projects are integrating Sui. But again, to answer your question, at the end of the day, they are two independent blockchains founded by two independent organizations. However, they were both like members of both Aptos and Sui worked at Facebook prior to joining their respective teams. Altan asks, how is this different than sharding? So usually sharding with respect to like traditional block or how you think of sharding with like Ethereum and Near, those are two blockchains that are either are like are either do use sharding or want to. They handle it differently because they don't have the same object centric approach that Sui does. With Sui, when we talk about sharding with respect to Sui, it's because every object, you can, like I said earlier, has its own destination. So this is how validators can use this intra-validator sharding, is what we like to call it, to be able to focus on particular parts of a blockchain at a time. So let's go to the next question. Labib asked, basically, what is the most basic difference between Move and Rust? So as you guys may have heard, and I like this, I like to think about it like this as well, that Move is almost like a dialect of Rust. So Move takes a lot of Rust's strong typed features, but basically strips away anything that doesn't relate to blockchain specific tasks. So basically, the way I like to explain it to people is that Move is Rust if you only cared about blockchain specific tasks. And I just think that's like a good way to think about it because especially if you look at the Sui standard library, which is a set of code provided by like the core team from Miston Labs. These are basically functions and APIs that makes it extremely easy to interact with the blockchain, the Sui blockchain. So next question from Angshita asks, are there any real blockchain apps which use Sui? So it depends on what you would consider real because Sui's on DevNet and testnet right now, and there are apps on Dev and testnet, but no, because Sui is not on mainnet yet, and there is no Sui token yet, there is no, I guess, real blockchain apps yet. But mainnet is scheduled to be released later this year. So again, depending on what you consider to be real, yes or no. Okay, so let's go to the next question asked by Will. So this is a good question. Can you give some more examples of apps that would only need simple transactions versus complex transactions? So the best way to think of a simple transaction is when you're just interacting with like one other person or like one other address, right? So I said earlier, like if I want to send you money, if I have like 5 Sui and I want to send you 2 Sui, that's a simple transfer function that doesn't involve anything else. If I want to send you an NFT similarly, that's just a direct transaction that doesn't involve anything else. But let's say I want to interact with a DEX, right? If you're interacting with a DEX, so a swap, or you want to add liquidity, withdraw liquidity, so on, they're all targeting the same object, and that is the DEX's liquidity pool or the DEX itself, the DEX object. So because the DEX object is a shared object, meaning anybody can interact with it permissionlessly as long as they meet the following criteria, it is going to be any transactions that interact with that will be ordered causally, will be ordered by causal uh, ordering. So and in the next workshop actually we'll actually go over, we'll program our own uh, objects, and we'll go over how you like instantiate what is like a simple object or an object that wouldn't that or an object that'll be involve simple transactions, and object a shared object which will thus require a complex uh, will be considered a complex transaction. Is validating on Sui permission or permissionless? it is permissionless. If you go on our website, there is a plan on how we plan to distribute Sui tokens come time for the mainnet launch. And we're doing so such that it is going to be as permissionless and as decentralized as possible. Because one of the biggest things we here at Sui believe is that a true blockchain, a true like blockchain network has to be permissionless. You know, if you're going to have this permission blockchain, then what are you building a blockchain for? So decentralization, permissionlessness is definitely in our core ethos, our core beliefs, and we're doing everything we can to ensure that this is the case. So how is decentralization guaranteed when all the data is stored on chain? So with the Sui network, Sui will be a classic proof of stake network that will utilize validators to ensure that the network remains decentralized. So this is uh, as opposed to how traditional NFTs are stored right now, because I remember a few months ago there was like this uh it was this like funny fiasco on Twitter where some person downloaded like every NFT on OpenSea like as a like Pirate Bay link, and he was essentially saying that, oh yeah, these NFTs just link to Google Drive or like Google Cloud or like AWS files. So with Sui we'll be able to store all these images on chain, and that will result in this decentralized validator network ensuring that the data is there, not that your data is at the whim of some like cloud data center that can be arbitrarily shut down. What is the future of blockchain and why is it Sui? Well, in terms of the future of blockchain, I'm not an oracle, so I cannot really like attest to what the future of blockchain will look like. But for the reasons that I mentioned in this presentation, the reason why I'm so bullish on Sui is because its validator and consensus model particularly, uh, goes through great strides in being able to split up the tasks that other blockchains don't usually care about, right? That other blockchains don't look at. And why is it Sui? Because again, I believe that Sui's object-centric approach is totally like a new paradigm with respect to programming on blockchains, something that you haven't seen up until now. And from my first, like when I first started programming on Sui, like I said earlier, I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, why can't all blockchain programming be this easy? And hopefully by next week, you'll see what I'm talking about. No. The question is, did you decide on a date for the Sui Builder House Tokyo in April? No, unfortunately, we do not have a date yet. Is there anything that cannot be done in Sui that can be done in other blockchains? I mean, to my knowledge, no. There is nothing that, for example, Sui make. No, yeah, no. You can do pretty much anything in Sui that you can do on any other traditional blockchain. And honestly, you can probably do it a lot easier in Sui. Yes, you can create a DAO in Sui Move. If you navigate to the Sui GitHub repository, there are certain modules in particular that just focus on like DAOs and governance, and that'll be a good place to get started. So the question is, because of many airdrop questions, maybe this will not be answered. Everyone's asking about the details of the community access program, so hope to get an answer here. So the community access program is pretty lengthy, and though if you Google it, it should be like one of the first results, and that'll probably explain it a lot better than I can right now. So the question says, interesting. So the validators run something like the shortest path algorithm inside. They take on tasks they are closest to rather than sharding and having a canonical chain. Is that correct? So this only refers to the mempool, the Narwhal mempool. Sui still has traditional blocks. So there is a traditional block, like a normal blockchain, like Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? But yeah, what the mempool does, the Narwhal mempool engine, uh, works similar to that, where it just focuses on objects or transactions that are involving or interacting with shared objects. So the question is, how much TPS is Sui clocking currently? Will it be the same in mainnet? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to either question right now. Will there be an exam at the end of the Sui Education course series? No. But I think the best way to test yourself at the end of this is to build your own DApp, right? I think the best test, the best way to really express what you learn is to put it to use. So, yeah, there could be like a multiple choice or short answer type test, but I think the best way to really see if you learned something is to take what you've learned and build something. And if you do build something, tag me on Twitter because I'll definitely want to see it. How does Sui handle the double spending problem? Based on the slide earlier, I am assuming such transactions don't go through consensus. So yes, so even though when we're talking about symbol transactions in this case, which is what you're talking about, which is what you're referring to, there is still that ordering involved. It's still being appended to the blockchain. So the total ins and outs of a particular transactions in and transactions outs are still recorded on the blockchain. But because these types of transactions don't have to stand in the same line as all the other transactions, we know that they're not going to affect the rest of the network. So, which is why they can reach finality quicker. So the question is, any examples of use cases where Sui can be a good fit? We're building a solution for DAOs and are considering Sui for storing sensitive data. Can I reach out on Twitter to discuss the advantages of using it? So, yeah, I definitely think a DAO will be a great fit for Sui right now because Sui is still new. I don't think uh, I've met any teams building DAOs yet. So I will definitely like to talk to you. Like, yeah, please after this, shoot me tag me in a post on Twitter, like, oh hey, I was the DAO guy. Let's talk. And I would love to chat. And yeah, just because like I said earlier, Sui's object-centric approach, in my opinion, makes it really easy to think of, okay, this DAO is like this shared object. The governance works like this, and so on. Yeah, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you one-on-one about it later on. How does sparse replay work? Do you get the full object history in the latest object in a read call, or is it the latest version object? So the sparse replay, you can view the evolution of that object over time. So instead of looking at the entire blockchain and having to query everything, you can only follow that particular object's evolution, or other objects that are pertaining to a particular smart contract or module, and you can follow their evolution over time instead of having to read everything. So the question is, in Sui, everything is an object model. Then where are objects programs stored? In Solana, everything are accounts that store programs are owned by the BPFL loader. The BPFL loader is owned by the native loader, and that's where the recursion ends. So, oh yes, so objects are usually stored in, I would say there's four different ways objects are stored. Objects are either stored by an address, so you can think of I mint an NFT of a sword and I transfer it to me. It belongs to my address. An object can be a shared object. So, for example, when I make an AMM, when I'm programming AMM, the AMM will be a shared object that anybody can interact with. It doesn't live in anyone's address. The third way is to store objects inside another object. So let's say, again, that same sword NFT game. If I'm a player in that game, my character is represented by an NFT that is stored in my address. And when I equip that sword belongs to that player, which belongs to me. So that's where the recursion ends in that case. And the fourth way that objects are stored is is an immutable shared object. So, for example, a version of a soulbound token in Sui could be mutualized by an object, and we'll talk about this more in the next session. But essentially, it'll be done such that you make a shared object and that it's immutable, so nobody can then mutate it. Yeah. Yeah, so is there something similar to ERC20 and ERC21 in Sui? So ERC20 tokens are basically fungible tokens, and ERC721s are non-fungible tokens. So yeah, also we'll go through this in the next session as well, but we'll go through what it means to create our own fungible token in Sui and our own non-fungible token in Sui. So again, this is also a little shortcut, or a little teaser, but because everything is an object in Sui, everything has its unique object, unique global identifier. Everything is technically an NFT in Sui. So we can also take these NFTs. So if you have like a coin, for example, you kind of like split it up and you send a little bit of coin to this person, a little bit of this coin to this other person. So you're so yeah, you can think of everything as an NFT. And for fungible tokens, it's pretty much like splitting up the NFT and sending it to people. Are there trade-offs in terms of decentralization? Validators are using intra-validator sharding. Would only a fraction of the network be validating a fraction of the transactions? That's a good question. I don't have like the perfect answer to that. I've only like kind of like scratched the surface with regards to like how validators validate every single transaction. So let me write that down because I'll definitely like even like for my own case, I definitely want to like get the answer to that. Good question. Will Uniswap get a realistic speed up if I implement it in Sui Move? Um, well, Uniswap, if we like look at Uniswap v3, right? Like the concentrated liquidity AMM, in terms of speeding up, I would say yeah, Sui in general. I mean, if you look at Uniswap, there's other like Uniswap v3 clones on other networks, right? Such as other EVM networks in particular, like Polygon and so forth, right? So I would say that in general, Sui will be faster than like core Ethereum just because Ethereum right now is a relatively slow network. But yeah. So the question is, does Sui have a bridge to all slash some of the other blockchains? So because Sui is not on mainnet yet, Sui having a bridge to another blockchain would be meaningless. So no. Is Sui better than existing DAG-based blockchains such as AVAX and Hedera? Better is subjective, and I don't want to insult anyone else. So NA, not applicable. What kind of hardware specs are necessary to be a validator besides a certain amount of Sui token? Yeah, you can definitely like look at this online. There's like lists of validator requirements. I don't know what they are off the top of my head. Is there any sidechain working on EVM on Sui testnet? Um, if you're asking about like layer two EVM solutions, I believe I know one project that is building like an EVM layer two on Sui, but I don't think they're on testnet yet. What's the advantage of writing smart contracts on Sui compared to Ethereum? So again, like I said earlier, Sui's object-centric approach, in my opinion, makes it very intuitive for how you look at objects and how you look at assets. So again, like not to like insult Ethereum because Ethereum's like still a great piece of technology at the end of the day. We don't want to like um, talk down or like disparage anyone else, but Ethereum and like the solidity in EVM has a lot of downfalls. A lot of the biggest hacks have occurred due to the fact that in Ethereum or the EVM in particular, um, there are lots of ways where contracts can get hacked. And one of the biggest things about Sui Move is that Move in general makes it super hard. It makes it for people to hack and is a super type safe language. So it makes like those like nine-figure hacks that you see almost impossible. And of course, like with a complete audit, with a good audit, the goal is to just make writing strong, safe contracts like part of our everyday instead of like having to like wake up to see like, oh, this other protocol is drowned or drained for like I don't know, like tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. Is there an IDE for Move? Yes. So there exists a Move plugin on both VS Code and Sea Lion. I've used both, and both are pretty good. What testnet details are available? Endpoints, and is there a wallet? And you have an Explorer for the transaction. So testnet details. I mean, yeah, there's like a testnet RBC endpoint provider. There are a bunch of wallets. And yes, there is a Sui Explorer. Is causal order of Sui as secure as total order of competitors? Yes, because again, we use validators to ensure that every transaction is uh, still valid at the end of the day. The thing is, because these validators run these, there is this intra-validator sharding. Um, we're able to reach that finality much quicker, and while still remaining like secure, like ensure that like a transaction that occurs later isn't marked as like happening before, or like to avoid a double spending problem. So if all the data is stored on chain, validators have to provide a huge amount of storage to store the blockchain data. This is difficult to realize by normal people because of effort and cost. Isn't there a problem with decentralization when only few can do this? Well, again, to go back to the point, because of like the way the Sui networks, because of the way validators can be able to scale, this should not be an issue. And that prices, like the price of like running a validator, should remain relatively predictable as the network grows and as there's more data stored on chain. Is there like a Sui library we can mint NFTs and tokens? So NFT, like I said pretty much earlier, because of Sui's object-oriented approach, object-centric approach, everything is pretty much an NFT. And writing a fungible token, you can write a fungible token, just a few lines of code. And we can go and yeah, because this workshop isn't really looking at Sui Move yet. This was just like a general overview. We will go through such examples in the next 5 workshops. How does Sui handle security and scalability, and what measures are in place to ensure the safety of users' data and assets? So Sui handles security like any other blockchain, right? If you're storing data on chain, how is it remaining secure? Via the validator network, right? And scalability, we talked about scalability earlier in terms of with respect to the intra-validator sharding that allows for users' assets or like transactions to, like I said earlier, there's as many buses as there are transactions, right? The question is, right now Aptos uses wormhole slash layer 0 back stablecoins. Do you know if getting native USD support like Solana, unlike Aptos, is a priority or being considered? That's not a question I can answer at this time. How would you describe Sui as a blockchain in one sentence, like an elevator pitch, and what do you think is its USP? I don't know what USP is, but my one sentence blockchain pitch to Sui or for Sui will be that Sui is a new L1 constructed from the ground up, ensuring delivering scalability and a new like paradigm with respect to smart contract development. Yeah, I would say those 2 points in particular, like how fast it is, like the lengths that like what goes on underneath the hood to ensure that Sui is fast and stays fast, and the way you program on it, I think, are the 2 biggest things. So can you please again explain shortly how the scaling works? Of course. So in traditional blockchains, you can think of every single transaction, anytime you want to interact with the blockchain, that's all sorted into the mempool. So let's say like in a 5-second span, one user transfers tokens to someone else, another user transfers an NFT to someone else, another user interacts with the DEX, another user like interacts with the game, another user um like is a swap on an AMM. Regardless of what they're doing, what the what the consensus network does is that it gets the time in which that transaction occurred in and makes sure that it's that transaction is like legit, it's secure. So like namely, a user isn't sending more money to someone else than they have in their wallet. A user can't like withdraw money in an AMM that doesn't belong to them, stuff like that. So because all these transactions have to be processed by one engine, it takes up time. So what Sui does instead is because it's able to execute on these transactions in parallel. So if I go back to that one slide, this slide, so you see we have like the coin balance, the NFT instance, and the DEX. These three transactions are all going to be will all occur in parallel with each other. So the person like sending a coin to someone else, he lives in his like own little like world in the Sui like validator network. The person interacting with the NFT instance, that's going to be handled by its own part, like the Sui NF or validator network and the DEX, the three. So at the end of the day, the only thing that needs to be ordered totally is going to be the three transactions that are occurring or interacting with the DEX. Is there a dedicated Web3 JS library for Sui? And does Wallet Connect work for connecting wallets to the Sui blockchain? I'm not sure if there's a Web3 JS library for Sui, but I know there are like certain like wallet adapters that are live that are on GitHub. How independent can a team be from the opinion of investment funds? I cannot answer that question. As the leader of the new public chain, how will Sui generate greater influence and development on Web3 through its own powerful advantages? Well, I mean, like, just like to answer that question with your question, we hope that our technology will drive builders and drive an audience to build and interact with our chain simply because they believe that is it's the most like technologically advanced chain or it's like the best tech for their use case. So we don't want to so yeah, I guess our whole point is that we want to attract this growth organically. If there's transaction ordering for shared objects, how do you tackle MEV? MEV is something that is not my forte. I would definitely have to do more research myself to understand how MEV works, especially with regards to Sui. So sorry, I cannot answer this.
We have also one question in Turkish, but I've translated it, saying that they don't know English, but do you have any sort of information in other languages? I think is what the question is asking.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if I can like translate this back to Turkish. Maybe you can, right? But you can tell them that if you go no, but if you go to our Discord, there are these dedicated language servers. So, and I believe Turkish is one of them. So, they'll be able to go to our the Discord, view the list of languages, and hopefully talk to other people in Turkish and like get more information with regards to Sui and from there.
Awesome. Cool. Some more questions coming in.
Let's see. What percentage of blockchain transactions are just plain transfers? Do you think improving on just simple transfers with the DAG that others have already done, e.g., Avalanche, makes Sui any different? So the first question: what percentage of blockchain transactions are plain transfers? I don't know. You can definitely like find this by looking at like going through the Sui Explorer, indexing all the data. That's not something I've done. Do you think improving on just simple transfers with the DAG that others have already done can make any difference? I mean, yeah, obviously, if you like improve throughput of simple transfers, I think like the entire network will uh, succeed. But like I said, the difference between like Avalanche and Sui is that like Avalanche is still EVM, right? Whereas Sui has this new object-centric approach that EVM chains do not have. Can you explain how to work token transfer? Um, so if you have like a faucet, I got 5 objects and it's calculated as a token. Um, so if you're interacting with tokens like on a front end, like a wallet, they'll usually have like the buttons because tokens and Sui follow like the pattern from the Sui standard library. So you'll be able to like send and receive tokens like that. Like the front end will take care of that.
I think that was our last question.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shayan, for one answering all of those questions. Like really great engagement from everyone. So thank you so much. And I think if that is everything, I guess. Would you like to say a few words to wrap up, Shayan, before I say my final announcements?
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, just as stated like a little while ago, like before the questions, right? Uh, just know next week is our next workshop, the Sui Denver Builder House, and the survey if you haven't done so already. Those three are going to be huge. And yeah, I'll give it to you, Angela. Thank you again for being such a great co-host or host, by the way. Really appreciate your help today.
Thank you. We actually have one more question that's just popped in. Here we go.
Why is network often experience rate limited? Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the thing is like Sui is still like a novel technology, right? We are still on like dev/test net, so we are still like ironing a lot of these rough edges out. And we like hopefully the whole point is that by the time we get to mainnet, it'll be smooth. So just bear with us for a little longer.
Cool. I'm just going to put this up there because it's quite nice. Matt just said, "Good job."
I'm gonna upvote that. Oh, too late. I was gonna upvote it, but.
Well, thank you everyone so much for coming. I think we're ending this just right on time as well. So just a reminder, our next Educate session will be next Monday, and it should be at 5:30 p.m. GMT, and this is on making your first smart contract using Sui Move. Is that right?
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for coming once again. And I think we'll end it there.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah, thank you so much everyone again, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.